What I wanted to start with was a brief overview of Section 508, which is why we're all here. And so I thought I would start out with some definitions. I hope you guys can see that in the back, because there's a lot of this, and I just kind of want to go through this. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to give you all of this right now and quiz you on it later. So what I did was I went through all this a few months ago, and I summarized as best I could. So this is a little more condensed version of what was on the previous screen. And so basically, what is Section 508? Oh, hi, welcome. In short, 508 is a child of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which prohibits the discrimination on the basis of disability for all things federal. So you cannot discriminate on disability in any federal agency. Now, Section 508 requires these agencies to use information and communication technology, or ICT, so that people with disabilities have comparable access, and not underlined comparable, as those without disabilities. And the idea behind this was to eliminate barriers to ICT, make opportunities available for persons with disabilities, and encourage technology development to achieve these goals. And how do we do that? So we use assistive technology, which is the hardware or software that helps those with disabilities, like a screen reader, a Braille keyboard, right? So we have the ICT, which is the information and communication technology, which is this computer, or this phone, or this tablet. And then we have the assistive technology, which is the stuff that we use to allow the person with the disability to get the same access to the computer or tablet that someone without a disability would have access. So a good example of assistive technology is Laura uses keyboard-only friendly software because her disability prevents her from using a mouse. So her peer at the office can use this particular piece of software, but she can't. So they developed the software so that it can work only with a keyboard and exclusively with a keyboard. Michelle uses a screen reader because her disability prevents her from seeing what's on the monitor. All right, so screen reader basically reads what's on the screen and says it out loud. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about later is about screen reading. And then finally, in I think 2008, Section 508 was revised because there was this web content accessibility guidelines that were out there, which is a globally recognized set of standards for websites. So they established this, and kind of Section 508 adopted it. With that, that was just a brief overview. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Gilmore, and he's going to give us a legal perspective on Section 508 and enlighten us. Mr. Gilmore. Thank you.
Whether I'm going to enlighten you or not, that might be a tall order. I'm just going to talk to you. Why, if you're here to talk about ADA compliance, do you need to hear from a lawyer? What's your name, sir?
Mine?
Yeah.
Brad.
Brad, at certain points in what I'm going to say, I'm going to ask you to cover your ears.
Got it. Yeah. I didn't hear nothing.
No, I want you to hear some, but I'll tell you when to cover your ears. And the reason why is that what I'm going to talk about is the reality of where we are. The reality of where we are is that in 2018, nearly 2,000 ADA website compliance lawsuits were filed in the U.S. That number is going to go up this year. To my knowledge, there haven't been any lawsuits at this point concerning housing authority websites. The only reason why I think that is the case today is because they don't think you got any money.
We don't.
Say it louder. And I'm going to tell you why I think that reality is going to go away. It's because most of these lawsuits, and now this has nothing to do with the person with a disability. This is the evil, dreaded legal profession, which I'm a member of, so I can say it's sometimes evil and dreaded. The legal profession has figured out that there's a point, a dollar figure, that if they bring these lawsuits, because essentially, and you'll hear more about it today, there is not a defense, that many companies are going to settle very quickly. And there's a nuisance value dollar figure that most companies will figure it's just worth it for us to settle and enter into an agreement that says that we will come into compliance over a certain period of time, as opposed to fighting these lawsuits. That figure right now, from what I read, is somewhere between $1,500 to maybe $3,000. And even for most of the poor housing authorities, that's not a unreachable figure. So, for instance, there's a gentleman, I won't use his name, in South Florida, who I think is, if I remember correctly, is black, who at last count personally had brought over 250 individual lawsuits in South Florida. Same lawsuit. Now, if you multiply 250 times 3,000 or so, all of that money doesn't come to the plaintiff. Mainly what that is attorney's fees. So the incentive for lawyers is to bring these lawsuits. It's easy, it's almost like shooting fish in a barrel. So, for those of you who know me, I'm usually fairly calm, but I've been hyped up about this for several months because I see it coming. And that's why y'all are here. Oh, everybody stand. A couple of you didn't get a chance to introduce yourselves. The distinguished gentleman with the beard in the back, you want to let us know who you are?
Gilmore, I appeal to legal resistance. I'm Tennessee Human Resources Director and compliance for the housing.
Thank you. Long live the resistance. The other distinguished gentleman who came in without a jacket.
William Russell, Sarasota Housing Authority.
I know you, but everybody might not know you. So, luckily, Hugo and Debbie and this housing authority were way ahead of the game when I started going, oh no, the sky's falling. They had already started working on this about a year ago, 2 years ago, 2+. So they were already way ahead of the game. Some of your colleagues reacted in this way, and I understood it. PDFs, which you all are going to talk about, was one of the biggest problems about what you put on your website. So many of your colleagues took down all PDFs right away. And one of the places this happened was the Orlando Housing Authority. This was on the heels of an article which I sent to many of you about governmental entities in the Central Florida area that have been targeted for these type of lawsuits. The problem is, which Hugo and everybody else is going to talk about, is almost all of you are going towards paperless. And you have on your website applications, information, forms, plans, agendas, resistance material. All of that stuff we're going towards having available for the convenience. So if you can't have it on there, it's an inconvenience. But we gotta mesh these two things. So Mr. Russell provided me with an article a couple of days ago, which was very timely. It talks about Guillermo Robles versus Domino Pizza. And this is a case that is progressing, and Domino's Pizza is appealing to the Supreme Court of the United States. It is lost in the previous court, and what Domino's is saying essentially is, look, having businesses comply with this is costly, it's unreasonable, and when the ADA was first created, it was well before there was even an internet. So it doesn't mention the internet, it didn't anticipate the internet. We should not have to comply with it. Obviously, Mr. Robles is arguing the different side of that, which is, yeah, you should have to comply with it. So if this case goes to the Supreme Court, it's possible that this is going to establish a significant precedent one way or the other. My prediction, it's only going to strengthen what you're here to find out about as to how you comply. I do not see Domino's Pizza winning, in my opinion. And one of the things that was raised by Mr. Robles' counsel is, why would Domino's Pizza want to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to fight this all the way to the Supreme Court when a fraction of that could have been used to come into compliance? So, the message today I'm trying to bring to you is the same message that I've been sending you, this information about this. And that is, sooner or later, these lawsuits are going to turn to housing authorities. We need to be prepared. It's harder, in my opinion, for smaller housing authorities. I'm glad to see many of the smaller housing authorities here. Because one, you don't have a HUBO on staff. You don't have an IT department. Number two, your web designer may or may not be familiar with the 508 issue and how to make sure you're compliant with that. And number three, it costs money to try to get into compliance. And all of you have said you're poor, but it's got to be done. So that's why I'm glad that Hugo and Debbie and other people who participate today were willing to share their knowledge with you and help you come into compliance. So later, I will be on the panel with everybody else to kind of talk about this some more. But I want to give you the Grim Reaper information first, and then you'll be told how hopefully you can comply and fix it. Thank you.
I have a pretty loud voice, and I don't know if I really need this, but we spent money on it. I think we've used it, we probably used it once or twice. We actually bought this for somebody's, no, I won't. We actually bought this for somebody special, you know.
Yeah, no, but not for me.
Oh, wow, that's debatable. Thank you. So with that, we talked about a little bit about mentioned that we started this about 2.5 years ago, probably in April of 2017. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about our experience and how we tackled this and how we started to come out of it, but we're not really out of it yet. I don't think we will be until they codify this stuff and make it legal. So in 2017, Mr. Gilmore sent us an email, and in the email, it was talking about a rising trend in websites that were not compliant. Now, this wasn't lawsuits, it was just, there were websites that we were discovering that weren't compliant. So that's the catalyst that started this. A couple days later, we saw an article in the news, and so that was just kind of verifying our situation, and this was our catalyst. And so we set about, how do we tackle this? Debbie came to me and said, we need to address this situation. Let's look at our website and see whether it meets these requirements. And at the time, I had PinellsHousing.com, one website, and I didn't know anything about 508. I knew very little. So what are we supposed to do? Well, we react, right? I went out and started Googling section 508. And at the time, 508.gov was out there. But again, I'm just reading this stuff, and then the recommendations. What did I do? I went to bigger agencies, Social Security Agency, I went to IRS.gov, and I was just looking at how, I'm just assuming in my head, they must be doing this at this point because they're much larger than us, and they can throw more resources at this stuff. So let me just kind of cheat and go take a look. And so I did. My favorite was the Kennedy Arts Center website. That's kind of where I got the idea. They had a regular website, and then they had an accessible website. And that was what I wanted. I liked it because it was, they'd taken out all the extra stuff that was causing the website to be inaccessible by people with disabilities. We set out for bid. We asked to get some quotes from web developers, and we found St. Pete Design, who's in the back, and we gave them the ideas. They worked with us. They built us a second website, our accessibility website. You see the arrow. If you go to our main website, it's the first thing that scrolls in. The screen reader will read that right after the logo. So the idea is that if you don't know it exists, even if you're on our main site, the screen reader will hit it second before it gets to stuff that might disrupt it, and the visitor will be able to go to the accessibility site. And this was basically the birth of our assistant site. And so what's different about this website versus our other website? Well, we took out features that were causing assisted technology to fail. Remember, assisted technology is that stuff that you're using to get to the computer, the website, the cell phone, the stuff that a disabled person needs to help them get over that hump. We use standard fonts, white background, black text. Later, WordPress started to develop these really cool plugins that we started to throw in there that basically allowed each visitor to customize the site as they landed on the site. So if they needed more contrast, they could do it. If they needed bigger fonts, they could do it. The biggest thing that I didn't have to do, but St. Pete Design did, was they had to go in and label every image on our sites. Imagine if you're a screen reader and you're reading a website left to right, top to bottom, and you get to a picture. Words, great. The screen reader can read the words. What's it going to do with the picture? Well, there's a thing in behind the picture that you can put a label in it, and you describe that picture. So, for example, our logo in the top left. So we would say Pinellas County Housing Authority logo, sun setting, water, beachfront, something like that. Just to give the person that's visually impaired an idea that they've come across an image on this website, and this is what the image is showing them. We did our best to try and meet the web content accessibility guidelines that were set forth in 2008 that we talked about. It was just this adoption of the Section 508 for the WCAG guidelines. So this was 2 years ago. We're done. Yes, we're done. We had a second site. It was accessible. we tried our best to meet the 508 recommendations. We thought we were done. No, we're not done. A few months ago, news articles that Mr. Gilmore mentioned started to surface. But this time it wasn't just accessibility, it was more focused towards visually impaired. And how the visually impaired and the assistive technology was handling our website. So I went back and I looked at it, and this is where the PDFs came into play. These darn PDFs. The assistive technology, the screen readers were not handling the PDFs. Why? So this is just going to be a quick, brief overview of PDFs. So what's a PDF? We all know what they are. They've been around for ages. It's a file. It's everywhere. They're usually tied with Adobe, but not exclusively. They're made from another file. Typically, you scan a file at a copier or your printer and the printer scanner, or you make the file from Word or Excel. They're on websites. There's two types of PDFs. There's the searchable and the picture PDF. So down here, we're going to have a little game. You'll see that, and I've kind of done it all, a lot of the work, but the red arrows point to these blue boxes. Can you spot the differences between the left and right box? Like, what am I doing what's happening with the blue box in the left, and what's happening with the blue area in the right?
You can highlight the text on the right.
All the text is highlighted on the right, yeah, right? And in the left, nothing's highlighted, not the text anyway. The reason is because that's a picture on the left. That's a scanned document that was not converted to a searchable document. And so if you're a screen reader and you get that PDF, what happens? Nothing. Doesn't make sense of any of that. This, it reads aloud and works. And this is the problem when you're visually impaired and you're using a screen reader and you get to this PDF on a website. So yeah, screen readers like Adobe or NVDA developed, I think, by two blind, is that right? Two blind people?
Yeah, in New Zealand, yeah.
Yeah, and then JAWS is the expensive one. I think it's $1,000 a license, but I didn't go into government pricing. I just went with just commercial licensing. And going back to this, Adobe can't even read that, and Adobe has their own screen reader, and they've had it forever. Unfortunately, most of us are using 9.5 here at this office, which is probably 12, 13 years old, and they have a built-in read aloud. Even if you don't have a licensed version of Adobe, you can have a read aloud. The PDF on the left can be made searchable, and maybe later I'll show you how that's done. And this is important. Readable does not mean that it's compliant. It just means that the screen reader can read it, which might cover your base for 95% of the visitors. And you're just worried about that litigious visitor that's going to say it's not Section 508 compliant. So how did we go about fixing our PDFs? Well, we went through phases. First, the discovery phase, which is, oh, these PDFs aren't working. So I went to the website. How do people with disabilities use the internet? YouTube, right? It's a great resource for everything. I went to YouTube and I found a couple of examples of professors who were showing classes, professors were blind, how they were using their keyboard and the screen readers to surf and get what they needed out of websites. And if you ever have an opportunity, go do it. It's pretty amazing because people that are visually impaired have this heightened sense. So the way the screen reader works for them, it's almost intelligible. It's going so fast, the words are cycling through so quickly that you and I can almost not understand it. And thank you, because I didn't know about screen readers until I sent Brad PDFs at Lighthouse in Pinellas, and he's like, hey, you want to check these screen readers out? This is kind of how you want to look at this stuff and begin your process of reacting to this discovery. And so our second phase was reaction, right? First thing we did was we added a disclaimer. Let's put a disclaimer out there that says, hey, we know about Section 508. we're working as best we can to try and deliver the information to every user equally. And we reacted, we took all our PDFs off. And we had 2 sites now, remember, we're doing things twice. So I had my regular site where I'm posting new information, and I have my other site where I'm posting new information. And so we had double the amount of PDFs. So it's about 1,000 PDFs that we had to take down. I still didn't know what was going on at the time. Some of the PDFs were working, very few, and a good chunk of them weren't. What the heck was causing it? Eventually, after a bunch of trial and error, I discovered that our logo, so I guess when we were making our PDFs in the past, we were using a template, and some of these templates, I guess, didn't translate well when they were producing these in Word. They were going into Word, they were producing these as PDF, and they didn't translate well. And that was what was causing the PDF to break. So what I saw was, instead of, in this example, let's say this is a PDF, learn how people with disabilities use the internet, YouTube videos of blind people browsing amazing. What it was doing is it was doing discover, learn, YouTube, Lighthouse, React, added, remove, how videos of all. It was very discombobulated. It wasn't reading it coherently. And we fixed it, we resolved it. That was the resolve phase. We fixed it. We took the logo out, everything worked. I simplified the document and I was able to put it back. But I didn't put back all of them. We put back only the ones that people truly needed. The agendas from 2 years ago, meeting notes, all that stuff, gone. We didn't put it back, and we cleaned up the links, because that's important. You don't want the broken links. And so since a couple months ago, when Mr. Gilmore started sending us these new emails about the lawsuits and such, I've made some more discoveries. So how many people are using Office 365? Half? They have a read aloud function. Word, Outlook, PowerPoint. You just click that button and it'll read what's on the screen, what's on the document. And that's fantastic. We have a new version of Adobe here called Acrobat 2017. We got the local version, but probably a lot of you are spending the monthly fee and using that $14 a month version or whatever it is, Reader DC. I think it's Acrobat Adobe DC. Or you just might have the downloaded Acrobat Reader, which is probably DC too. And as I said earlier, they've always had this read aloud function, which is a couple of hotkeys, Control-Shift-Y and then Control-Shift-B, and it'll start reading it out loud to you. But the licensed versions, so the DC, the ones that cost a lot of money, have extra functions like enhanced scans, which takes a PDF of a picture or a broken PDF and it does its best to turn it into something that's intelligible that can be read from a screen reader. And they also have the accessibility tool, which is fantastic. I just discovered this earlier this week in preparation for this workshop. The accessibility tool, they built in all this action that looks at the WCAG guidelines and PDF guidelines, and it evaluates whether that PDF is accessible or not based on the criteria you give it. And then you get a report, and then you can fix it. So it moves a lot quicker than it used to. And then one thing that I also noticed that I wanted to point out, how many use DocuSign or Adobe Sign or one of those sites where people can visit it and make their signatures? Spectrum uses it a lot, Bright House, yeah. So I called Adobe Sign, which is a subdivision of Adobe, and when you post your forms out there and you ask people to go sign them, that document is not compliant. Now I don't know if it works the same with DocuSign or the other providers, but I know for certain that Adobe Sign is not compliant, so it's important to know. I think it's because they have these programming layers that go over the document that is a PDF that screws everything up. And then finally, this, like I said earlier, this doesn't end. We continue to review this, we continue to evolve, we continue to get more information. Like I said, the packets have example disclaimers on the back, and we have a lot of references there too. What I wanted to do, and I thought of this real quickly, I just wanted to show you what I was describing. I installed a screen reader NVDA yesterday. Just to give you guys an example. So wherever I put my mouse, it's going to read aloud where So that's the NVDA, and that's kind of what it does.
Alert. All wake up. Alert.
Right,
Not
let me
NVD,
close that.
NVD exit. Alert. Not human echo.
Okay, so that's NVDA, that's what a screen reader does. JAWS is similar, like I said, it's expensive, but that's free. You can download it when you get back, and you can test your website just by pulling it up, running NVDA, and running it, and then just mousing over and let it just read the screen.
You can change the voice, by the way.
Yes, yeah, there's 3 voices. There's a female and 2 men, and you can speed it up or slow it down. Yeah.
That one sounded like Darth Vader.
Yeah, you don't have to listen to the robot.
The other thing I wanted to show you real quickly is, so this is a PDF, and this is a purchase order, and this is the example of what I was talking about earlier. This is a picture PDF. And we're using a very old version of Acrobat. This is 9.5, so anything going forward after 9.5 should work just as well, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this to a document that can be recognized, and it's just a click. So now this document, I can select the text in this document, or most of the text. And it's going to do its best job. The newer versions do a much better job than the older versions, obviously. And so then I want to show you the reader.
Pinellas Housing Authority, the Dean S. Robinson Administration Building.
So this is not NVDA. This is the read aloud function in Reader. That's in every version of Acrobat Reader.
Area code 727-443-7684. Area code 727-441-334. Procurement at Pinellas.
It's tough to talk over. The other thing that I wanted to show you is I mentioned the accessibility function. So that was the enhanced scans function, which is in the new versions of Acrobat. The accessibility report, which is the accessibility function in Acrobat, you can run the report and it'll tell you what's wrong. And you can see there's I ran that report on that file that we just looked at before I had converted it, and you can see there's a lot of fails here. There's an image-only PDF failure. The image wasn't tagged properly, which is probably our logo. And quite a slew of other things. So if you have mission-critical PDFs that you need to put on your website, you can use that accessibility function, if you pay for it, to help you out. And in the references, you'll see it's not just Acrobat. You can go out there and get other pieces of software like Common PDF Validator is another one. I think you told me about that, right, Brett? Yeah. So that's our experience in a nutshell. And with that said, does anybody have any questions? Yes.
How important is it, do you think, to have 2 separate websites?
Right, so that's interesting that you asked that. We're continuing to evolve. That's our next step, is to merge. What I want to do is, because it's difficult for us to have to do things twice and make sure we don't make mistakes here versus there. So the next step in our process is to merge and make one website that's accessible to all. And that way we just handle it. Remember, we started this 2+ years ago. So at the time when I was cheating and looking at trying to get ideas, I saw this guy and this guy, they had these other sites that we could go to and see. That's kind of the direction I chose. But yeah, going forward, we're probably in the next couple months we're going to merge. Yes?
It's easy to assume that a person with a disability would have the tools that they need to review a site, but is there a requirement or necessity for us to teach them how to read our site or provide them the tools to read?
That's a good question.
That's my job. That's what the lighthouses and other agencies like that do. They teach people how to use technology, in their lives or at work. But yes, from a website owner's perspective, you would expect your visitors, if they needed it, to be able to use the tools to access it.
Yeah. And we actually have, in the lobby, we put NVDA on one of the computers in the lobby so that if people came in, they could use the use the NVDA software.
That would be my question, because I have a computer lobby that the clients can access. So
Yeah.
I need to.
Sure, throw it on there and let everybody know that that's available. Yeah, so that they can point people in that direction. Joe?
I actually had something to reply to him. When websites, when you build an accessibility statement inside that, it's kind of like a PDF inside there. In there, you can tell the world, whoever's reading it, what your site works with. You can say, this technology works with NVDA and Chrome or and Windows or things like that. So it kind of tells them what your site works best with.
Okay. All right. Oh, this is starting to go. This side. So my portion is done. The next part is it's a good segue because we're going to talk about web accessibility in your website, and we've asked the people from St. Pete Design to come over and talk a little bit about the back end, the development side of things. Do you guys need a microphone?
Okay, hi everybody, I'm Steve Curtis, this is Joe Lopresti, we're with St. Pete Design. We're a local web development company, we're located right here in St. Pete, Florida, and we're here because Hugo actually got us inadvertently into 508 compliance by calling us. We audit, remediate, and build WordPress websites for accessibility and compliance. We teach how to get compliant, stay compliant, companies who use WordPress, and we give WordPress accessibility clubs across the U.S. Actually, that's mostly Joe. I do it in Florida. Our story. So usually we start out and we talk about what I've done with the slide here, but since I'm here, we really got into this because, like I said, Hugo called us and he said, you know, we need a compliant version of our website. And like Hugo said before, he wanted to make another website, another version of the site that was compliant, right? So I'm like, well, yeah, we could do that. You know, we're WordPress experts. Sounds easy enough, right? Well, we realized really quickly that it was not that easy, that there wasn't much information out there about making a website that's 508 compliant at the time, 2 years ago, 2017. So we started researching YouTube, WordPress forums, and then we went to the NFB convention, National Federation for the Blind Convention, and we sat in on a few classes there in Orlando. We actually attended 2 years in a row. And I remember we sat in on a specific class for how low vision and blind users access the internet. We didn't know, we had no idea at the time. And we were blown away by how difficult it is for low vision and blind users to go to the websites that we made every day. It really kind of moved us actually because of how difficult it was for them. Things that all of us in this room probably, or most of us, take for granted is really difficult. You heard the screen reader, the NVDA, right? Well, imagine if that's how you had to access every website every time you went to one, okay? So that's when we realized how difficult it was to find any information as developers. And since then, we've been trying to get as much information as we can and get the word out. So we've been doing talks, conferences since 2018, really. All right. So with that, I'll give the clicker to Joe. Just the big, yeah, there you go.
All right, well, this outline, we're gonna talk about some facts about 508. I'm gonna talk about some lawsuits because I know that's kind of the important one. Then we're gonna offer our 11 easy steps for solutions. I know we probably don't have any web developers in here.
I think there's a couple.
Is there a couple? Who is a web developer? Who? Okay. So you might understand kind of what we're saying. So we're trying to kind of keep it nice and simple. And at the end, we're going to give you plenty of resources, and it's all, most of it's free what we offer. A few facts: over 1.3 billion people worldwide have some sort of disability. That's a huge, huge number. 253 million people have a low vision disability, and of that, 19 million children are blind, have some sort of low vision. So I have 2 kids. Steve has a daughter, and our kids, you know, are super intertwined with technology. I can't imagine them being separated from. They would have anxiety It just wouldn't work well in my house.
Which is also a disability.
Yes, which is also a disability, yeah. We're working on that, one step at a time. And we met Matt Mullenweg, who's the big wig at WordPress, and he actually said one time to us that every single one of us, so every one of us in this room will be disabled at some point in our life. We were born disabled, we couldn't talk, we couldn't walk, we didn't have motor functions, we couldn't read, and we will probably end up back there towards the end of our life, and we will have a temporary disability. Broken arm, you're carrying groceries in one hand, you're in a noisy room, we will have troubles. All right. Hugo spoke a little bit about this, or maybe it was Mr. Gilmore, but there were 814 Section 508 lawsuits of 2017. There was over 2,200 last year. These are just federal. The state lawsuits are in the thousands. Just California alone had 4,000. The state. All 2,000 lawsuits were filed by less than 50 plaintiffs. I think the actual number was 28 plaintiffs. So like Mr. Gilmore was talking about, that's just the path that we're on. It's just the way it is. The funny thing is the majority of the lawsuits are filed under the Title III Act, which states that I have a restaurant, so I've dealt with this on the brick and mortar side. So you're talking blue parking spaces, ramps. Title III is access for disabled individuals in your brick and mortar. Well, what they're doing now is that's being transferred over to the digital landscape. So they're saying because of Title III that these individuals have to have the same access to your website, just like they would for your brick and mortar. So that's what the majority of the lawsuits are happening under. Here's just a little graph. You can see in 2015 there were 57 lawsuits. 262 lawsuits in 2016, 800 in 2017, and over 2,200 in 2018. I like this graph because you can see the exponential growth. You can see where it's trending. All right, this is a lawsuit from Fathead. I just like to include this because in this, it actually included some things that went wrong. If you look down number one, empty or missing form labels, empty links that contain no text, redundant links. These were actually named in the lawsuit for why they were being sued. I don't think, Mr. Gilmore, I think this is the individual Mr. Gilmore is speaking about. You don't want to say his name, but I'm gonna. I got 2 pages here. This is one individual. These are all, if you notice, these are all cities and counties in Florida. They literally just went down the line. And you see all this right here. That's where we're at. That's why I have a feeling we're talking about this right now. This is huge. All right, and we also, I'm going to hit a little bit on PDFs. Why PDFs are so important. They mentioned earlier that a lot of cities have formed an ADA committee that are looking into how to make all the city's documents and media accessible. Mr. Price, the individual who's all the lawsuits, or claims the county, and these are his exact words, is blatantly discriminating by its failure to provide accessible electronic documents for blind, visually impaired citizens, and he called it a virtual barrier. And they sell it for a little over $15,000. A law says that the plaintiff is not allowed to get the money, that those are pretty much lawyer fees. I think he gets like $1,000 or something, a very small amount. But that $15,700, so the individual who's getting sued had to pay the $15,700 plus their own personal lawyer fees. And I guarantee remediation would have been way cheaper and way easier. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of cities are now just removing their PDF files because it's such a problem. Such a problem. It's a big problem. March 2019, City Council unanimously approved a budget amendment of $25 to bring the city's website into compliance. I just threw that in there because I thought that was pretty interesting. And then we got another lady here who has sued. She's suing just businesses, but she sued over 175 businesses in Florida. And again, they're just going down. Like in my brick and mortar, my restaurant, they would go up the street one day and come down the west side of the street the next day. And wherever this lady in a wheelchair had a problem, they sent the letter. That's just how they do it. Now, we're in a tough area because I believe in the cause. I believe that these things have to be fixed. But I don't really believe in these drive-by lawsuits. But we're in that position to where it kind of takes that hard correction to kind of break that lock. And then once they get it situated, and hopefully the Domino's lawsuit will actually lay some groundwork for us to be compliant, and then we'll be able to steer the ship back to the middle, in my opinion. All right, what is WCAG? The most recent version is 2.1. It's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These are the worldwide guidelines that they put forth as your guidelines to be compliant. They break it down into 3 levels: A, AA, and AAA. Section 508 refers us back to WCAG and says you have to be level A and AA compliant of WCAG to be Section 508 compliant. Section 508. This was made a while ago, and we have a link later on to the refresh of it. The most recent one says that all government agencies, anybody doing business with the government, has to be Section 508 compliant. We've done business with companies that have a piece of paper they actually have to fill out and sign saying their website is 508 compliant to even place a bid. And I'm finding that a lot of even nonprofits, the majority of nonprofits I'm dealing with, have to be compliant as well because they're getting tax credits or whatever it is they're getting. That's just like money. All right, WCAG breaks it down into 4 main ideas. You got perceivable. It's POUR is the acronym. You got perceivable. That deals with text alternative, media, distinguishable. You got operable. You got to make sure it's keyboard accessible. Deal with time limits. Deal with people with seizures. You got understandable. Make sure it's readable. Make sure it's predictable. Make sure that all of your input assistance works with it. Robust. Make sure it's compatible with lots of assistive technology, and make sure it's compatible years down the road. We all understand how fast technology turns over, so don't just think we're good for a year or two. I mean, you want to think down the road. Otherwise, you're going to be revisiting it every year, every other year. All right. Why does 508 exist?
All right, so with that, it's my portion. So why does Section 508 exist? That's why. That's not where that is supposed to be a blank slide, because when a blind user goes to your website, that's what they see. So all the time and energy that you've put into your website, especially if you're a developer, all of you try to make it look great, you try to use this font and this color scheme and all of that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if somebody's using a screen reader, okay? So what we've done is we've put together our 11 easy steps to help with compliance. This may be a little, it's a little bit on the development side, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and jump right into it. So what do you need to do to your website? What can you do today, okay, or tomorrow, or in the coming weeks to make your website 508 compliant, okay? Number 1, provide alternative text for non-text content. So in WordPress, I don't know if, do you guys use WordPress by a show of hands? Okay, it's the most common CMS there is. Okay, so this talk is focused on WordPress for that reason, and because, well, we're WordPress developers. So in WordPress, if you click on a photo, you go into your media library, and they have a little spot where you can just put in some alt text. So you would want to describe the picture. Now, a lot of websites are made where they just put the pictures in and they don't provide alt text. I would say that I did that for the vast majority of websites that I made until I realized that, well, you can't, that's not how you're supposed to do it. You're not going to be 508 compliant. So now we make sure that we do this, okay? So you provide an alternate text that describes the photo that you have, okay? That was a picture. I'll go back to the picture real quick. It's a picture of a device that allows you to see, right? I think, Joe, you took that picture, if I'm not mistaken, right? In the NFB. And in WordPress also, you can, if it's just a decorative photo, you don't have to provide alt text. Is that correct, Joe?
Correct.
So you can just check that box there, okay?
What that does, that lets the screen reader just skip right over that picture because the screen reader understands that picture is not conveying any information, so it acts like it's not even there. It's just not important. And I would like to say with the alt text, that it's the easiest thing to do as you're adding pictures and stuff, but it's one of the harder things to do if you got to come back and fix it because you got to pull them off the front of your site. You can't just add alt text to one picture in the back and it pushes it through. You gotta go to every picture you've used and add an alt text. I think you had
I think, putting double quotes in the alt text would fulfill the same, job as the descriptive checkbox. If you
Okay.
don't have that in your content management system.
Right, this is a new Gutenberg update, so if you don't have the Gutenberg, that's just a manual way to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you provide, handouts of this
Yeah.
for us?
Yes,
We have.
yes, I do. All right, so number 2, label form elements for input fields, okay? So what is that? That's pretty simple, really. If you have a contact form on your website or any type of form, you need to make sure that they're labeled properly, okay?
What a lot of people will think they'll misunderstand. They'll stick a placeholder like where it says first name or last name. If that's inside your input box, that's a placeholder. That's not properly labeled. Your screen reader is a good chance it won't read that off. So.
All right, so number 3, add manuscript or closed captions for videos, add audio description for animations. So what's an example of closed captions? This is my favorite slide. It's my esteemed colleague. So anyway, this is just, everybody probably knows what closed captions are, right? So you should have closed captions on your videos if you have them. An example of an audio description. What is that exactly? Well, there's a great video on YouTube of The Lion King, which most of you are probably familiar with. And they give an audio description at the beginning, where at the beginning there's a lady who voices over and she says all the animals are running up the hill, it's a beautiful day, the clouds are out, you know, it's a nice field. So she gives an audio description. So that's necessary if you have any kind of videos. I don't know that you guys have a lot of videos on your websites, but if you do, not anymore, right?
Well, you know, YouTube makes it very easy for you to add subtitles and closed captions. They actually do it. They give you multiple options. They'll automatically do it in multiple language, or you can set it up to where they'll play the video for you and you can type in the manuscript as it goes, or you can just upload a file. Or you can just release it on the front end and let users chime in and type the manuscript for you as the video goes. If that's the route you choose, I highly suggest that you go over everything that an individual put in, because we can see where there'll be problems with that.
So you can crowdsource.
Right, so YouTube makes it very easy, and a lot of low vision individuals get the majority of their information from YouTube because it makes it so easy for them.
All right, so number 4, ensure that color contrast meets minimum thresholds. So your contrast ratio, color contrast ratio should be a minimum of 4.5 to 1, and with the exception of links and text, they can be 3 to 1. So, you know, what does that mean exactly, your contrast ratio? This is your contrast ratio. This is bad contrast ratio, okay? I've got pretty good vision. It's probably not as good as it was 15 years ago. But the one on the bottom always gets me. I can see it a little better today on this screen, but on some of the screens we put it up on, I can almost not read it, okay? So if your website looks like this, well, that's bad contrast. So anybody with even a mild vision impairment is gonna have trouble reading your content, okay? So this is what good contrast looks like. This is why your contrast ratio is important, okay? That's much easier to read, obviously, and that's what your website should look like. Again, especially, I don't see as much of this nowadays, but 5 years ago, you would see a ton of websites with terrible contrast, and they're still out there. They really are still out there. So just make sure that you've got good contrast ratio. Okay, make all links text descriptive and underline them. So for a bad example of link descriptions, click here or read more, okay? That's not that doesn't tell somebody who's using a screen reader what that link does, right? And I know that I have made that exact click here 1,000 times before I realized that I shouldn't be doing that. I would say that every web developer has, if they've been doing this for any length of time. So click here, read more, those don't work, they're bad. So for an example of a good link description, follow this link to Wikipedia. It actually says, hey, this is where this link goes, okay? So make sure your link tells where the link goes, okay? It's very important.
because the low vision individuals use screen readers, and the way they use them, they can have it set up to where it just goes through their headers or it just goes through their links. So they don't have any context clues when they get to the link. That screen reader will just announce link, click here, or link, read more. So you can, if you're a low vision individual, you have no idea where that's going. But if your screen reader says link Wikipedia, now you know you're going to Wikipedia. That's why that's important.
And with that, I believe this is free, Joe.
Okay, well, the color of any given content cannot be the only indication of meaning. What do I mean by that? Incorrect example, if you're colorblind, you would not be able to recognize the link to Wikipedia because it would blend in with the other text. Can anybody here tell me where the link is? We have no idea, because if we're colorblind, I think 1 out of 10 men are colorblind, you're gonna have no idea. So you need other means than just color. Here we go, if you're colorblind, you'd be able to recognize the link to Wikipedia because it stands out from the other text. Even though we're used to seeing it blue, even though it's not blue, you still have a good idea that that's a link. So it's very important. Another way here is for your input fields. Incorrect example is required fields are in red, name and email. Now if you could just close your eyes and follow me for a second, that's how the screen reader is going to read it to you. It's going to say required fields are in red, name and email. Now from that statement, can you tell me which one is red? Unless you're looking at it, you have no idea. Easy fix. Required fields are in red and marked with an asterisk, name, email, asterisk. So now the individual knows that it's the email that's required because it has an asterisk. All right. One of the easiest things we can do here, make sure your font size is at least 16 and properly spaced when enlarged by 200%. A couple of little caveats in there, 2% between paragraphs, 1.5% between lines. What that does is, I wish I had an example, it just takes a conjungled mess of text and spaces them better so you can read it better. And this also focuses on mobile for the enlarged 200%, because when you take your site from desktop and put it to mobile, it shrinks everything. So if your text doesn't resize, a lot of times it'll start overlapping, and that's a fail. You can't have that. So make sure your text is spaced properly. And another assistive technology, a trick that a lot of people use, is they increase the size of the font. That's like one of the number one things they do instantly, just increase the size of the font. So, all right, error handling. If there's an input error by the user, it must be identified and inscribed in the text explaining the error. We're dealing with input values again. So if you go through here and you hit a couple of things, we can see a title, asterisk, so that's required. Last name, asterisk, that's required. I did not enter those. And then I hit enter, and this is how it spit it back to me. I added the red boxes, but everything else is the program. So please review the errors below. Title is required, and my focus date is on that. So I'd be able to hit enter, and I'm inputting right there. That's how you want to handle that. I know we probably have a lot of input forms in this room. Okay, we got tab navigation. Your entire site should be able to be navigated by using your only your keyboard, and don't forget the focus state. This has to do with like motor functions and stuff. An individual not able to use a mouse, your whole site's got to be navigable by only a keyboard. You can use the tab button, like the tab, space, enter, and arrow keys are pretty much the standard ones. But you got to be careful too. Don't ignore the focus state, because when they're using the keyboard, the tab button to go through, it should go from left to right, top to bottom. Every time you land on something that's focusable, you want to make sure that individual knows it. I like to do a little box around it or make it get larger so they know when they land on that, that's what it is. That's very, very important. I see a lot of people, you can navigate your site, but then you lose focus state halfway through. All right, you must offer flexible time limits, if any. So if an individual's on your site, and if you have a time limit, we give other WordPress talks, so we say for security reasons, you want to log out idle users. Or if you're dealing with credit cards, any kind of pertinent information, it's just a good security thing to have to log out idle users. So if that's the system that you're using, you want to make it very easy for the end user to gain more time. Something popping up saying, you're about to run out of time. If you need more time, just hit enter, and they can just hit enter and then gain 5 minutes, 1 minute, 10 minutes, however you want to set it up, but give them the option for more time. All right, number 11, provide skip nav links so that the user can skip repetitive content. such as nav menus. This is very important. I know there's not a lot of developers in here, but as a developer, we like the big drop-down navigation menus. Typically, the bigger the nav menu, the more we can charge. But the problem is every time a disabled individual goes to every page on your site, they have to navigate through that huge menu just to get to the body of content. So they're hitting tab, depending on how big your nav menu is, 20, 30 times every page. So what you want to do is add a skip link. Now, we all know what Publix is. Usually when I'm going around America, nobody knows what Publix is. Well, this is Publix website, and the first thing after you leave their URL is goes to skip to primary content. And you can see the little focus state, the little blue box around there. So now that individual can hit enter, and it'll skip all the nav, all the repetitive stuff that's on every page, and go straight to the body of content. That's a huge, huge help to an individual who's using a screen reader. Well, that's our 11 easy steps. We just kind of wanted to make it real quick and real simple to the point. So here's some free accessibility testing tools. I know we don't have a lot of developers here, but these are all free. And you got Axchrome, you got Wave, Google Lighthouse, Contrast Ratio Checker, we got WordPress accessibility tools, that's our plugin. We give you a bunch of stuff in there. If you're dealing with alt text, that'll bring all your alt text to one. We add a totally testing software from Khan University. We give you a contrast ratio checker, an interactive checklist on the WCAG guidelines. I like that because you can have your whole team on that, because we just break down every guideline and it allows you to check off the ones that are done, and obviously the ones that aren't checked off aren't done. So your whole team can work on the same project at once. They can look at something and say, hey, that's not done, let's work on that, as opposed to working on the same thing over and over again. All right, another thing we offer, this does not cure the PDF problem that I know a lot of you guys are having, but what this does is this actually adds a little widget on the front of your site, and I think you had it, and that's the one that opens up, yeah, and it allows, this is really helpful to the end user, because it allows them to do things like increase font size, fix your contrast ratio, set things up in HTML, let you desaturate, let you increase your cursor size, do all kinds of amazing things that really help. And it takes next to no effort on our part, because you just add this little piece of CSS on the front and it lets the end user do all the work if they need to do stuff. It's very useful. Okay, here we go. I got to puts a little piece of CSS on the bottom left right here. So any individual will go to our site who needs help with this, they hit that button and it opens up a menu. And it allows them to help with the keyboard nav, increase cursor size, contrast, increase the text size, stop animations. A lot of times if there's sliders and animations, it'll help them stop that. All kinds of things. You really do a good service by putting this on the front of your site. All right, here's some more tools. Accessibility statement generator. This is very important. As I mentioned earlier, this conveys a lot of information to the end user. Not only can you tell them things like what your site works with, doesn't work, more importantly, what it doesn't work with, but what it does also is it gives them an outlet. I'm in the customer service business, and I know that you can stop 99% of the complaints by giving that customer a good outlet and handling it at the moment, as opposed to letting it build up and continue on. I think Mr. Price from the lawsuits, it named in there that he had a problem with one of the sites for their PDFs, and he had to mail them to request the paper form, and it took them over a month to respond, saying sorry, basically saying sorry, there's nothing we can do about it at this point. And because there was such a large time lapse, that kind of gave his case a lot of credence. And again, if you give them an outlet to just call immediately and talk to somebody, in my personal opinion, you can fix a lot of problems right then and there with kindness, helpfulness, and handling it right then and there.
Also, NVDA, which Hugo mentioned earlier, I always like to plug them because it's a screen reader that's made by two blind developers. I can't think of a better person to develop a screen reader, obviously. It's free. You heard Hugo use it earlier. I suggest all of you download either that or maybe an even easier version for web browsing is Chromevox, which does the same thing. These are both free and easy to download. I think Chromevox is probably a little bit easier. It's a Google Chrome extension. So.
And NVDA only works with Windows. It's a Windows-based screen reader. So for all the Mac users out there, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you.
They've got options for it.
Yeah, they do like JAWS. Yeah, everybody's got their voiceover. That's their built-in one. Here's some resources for you guys. The actual WCAG 2.1 guidelines up there from the W3C, the DOJ withdrawing their recommendations a few years ago, a list of lawsuits in the first 2 months of 2018. That's just good reading. Huge companies, Amazon, Nike, Rolex, Domino's. I mean, big companies. It was mentioned earlier that you would think these companies would be accessible. They got unlimited budget, but they weren't. Comparison table, lawsuits of big corporations, the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience, that's the refresh that says that you guys have to be Section 508 compliant. That's the actual law. So you can follow that link and that pulls it up. Another good link on web accessibility laws by state. Now when I looked at this, Florida doesn't have anything, so we're kind of extra screwed. Yeah, right. A good thing though, you got a tax form here. I want to include this to everybody here. You get 50 cents back on every dollar you spend, up to 5,000 back or 10,000 spent on your accessibility needs. So this is very important. I think you can't have more than 30 employees, and I think you can't have more than $1 million in revenue. But if you meet those two pieces of criteria, you can get up to $5,000 back on all your accessibility needs. So I know budget is a constraint here, so this will help.
And with that, we'll take any questions.
All right, can you go back to the?
Can we,
Come on.
can you can give me those two slides, and when I send out the links for the video, and then I can send the resources and the stuff so everybody doesn't have to check that.
Yes, absolutely. You guys can go to our website too, and we have a page with a whole bunch of talks strictly on accessibility, and you can, this talk, how to test, a couple other talks, you can check that out.
I have a question. I don't know if it's for you guys, but just in the room. How many of you guys have social media pages, Facebook pages, Twitter accounts for the Housing Authority? And is Facebook handling this, or is this something we still also need to look at from, the Housing Authority standpoint? The accessibility. Because I really had to create a Facebook page for my Housing Authority because someone else tried to and didn't spell it right. So I had to go in and create it and shut it basically to control the name Seminole County Housing Authority on Facebook.
Right.
And I had never intended to do social media, but now unfortunately I am, and it was more to prevent bad information down there and us being held liable because someone else created a page in the Housing Authority's name.
Right. Well, I got a couple of different ways to attack that. One, I've never seen a lawsuit for an individual because their Facebook was inaccessible. Two, as long as, like on my restaurant, I have a little widget on the bottom that you can scroll through a Facebook. That's questionable. As long as you don't have something like that on your site, you should be fine. And there is also some things about third-party plugins and stuff about that. But I would suggest that as long as you don't have, like I have that Facebook widget on your page, you should be fine.
I didn't even want a Facebook page, but I had to prevent it because someone went in and created a page called Seminole County Housing AUTH. So they stopped it. So I was like, what? And two of my employees liked the damn thing. So I'm like, really? Come on.
What team are you on?
Obviously wasn't me, so I had to go in and create the page so I could control it.
Right.
Facebook and Twitter are pretty accessible pages.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, Twitter does a lot actually.
Issues, when I'm working with my clients on those pages, so yeah, they're pretty good.
Right. And they're off your site too, so if there's a problem,
It's not you, yeah.
It's not you, it's Facebook. Just don't put it on your site.
Yeah.
Like this, my client did. Do you have any other questions? Yes.
Got one, and I'm hoping this is not off base, but my thought is, like, what is compliance? Websites are constantly under construction. So you're never 100%. I don't think you're ever gonna create 100%. So, you know, you're reviewing the site and you come across errors. You know, what is the legality?
Yeah, it's
what-
tough.
what's
When we
100%?
remediate sites, we come in and we guarantee it's accessible at that point.
Okay.
Right, but we all, just like you said, websites are constantly growing, so we're always adding content. So what we do is we'll offer a service that we'll come in once a month, or when you add some content, and we just re-look over the new content you added and make sure that's accessible, and then you know, you should continue to be accessible. But to your point, it does take, there's no such thing as, okay, my hands are clean, you're done, we're good. You know, like Hugo said, 2 years later, he's re-looking at the site, and there's things you gotta continue to do. Always, it's an ongoing process.
I literally took my site down, put it under construction when all this came out, and then I was like, because our PDFs were forms for participants, so they don't have to drive 30 miles to get to us, because we're in a remote location. And ultimately what we did is we took every PDF and every picture off, and then put the site back up. So now, what I have is when clients call, I need this form, blah, 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 we just email it to them. And, but it's still, it's a hassle for my employees, because it used to be stuff that we didn't have to deal with, now we're having to deal with, because small agency, I have 8 employees. We don't have time or money for this.
It still might not be compliant just because it's email doesn't guarantee it's compliant.
Right.
You know, a solution, an easy solution that we found for this scenario, because we know PDFs are tough. And if you want, we could remediate every PDF file, but the bill's just gonna go through the roof. So what we suggest to do is put a little link before that saying, if you need help with this PDF, call. Put the office phone number in there. So if it's obviously during business hours, they can call and talk to somebody to get help filling out that PDF. Because remember, it's all about these virtual barriers, like Mr. Price said. So if you're able to eliminate as many of those as possible, you're just getting better and better and better. So if an individual has trouble with PDF, but he can call somebody or she can call somebody and say, help me, and you have someone walk through it. And it's a tedious process, but you gotta think, how many times is someone actually gonna call? And if you can offer that service and walk them through it, I've not seen any laws back me up on this, but in my mind, that individual does not have that virtual barrier anymore, and they were able to do what they wanted, which is fill out the PDF.
I say, when our PDFs weren't fillable, they were printable. So you print out the form and, mail it to us, email it to us, however you need to get it to us. But none of our PDFs were fillable, but under abundance of caution, I took everything down.
Right.
Which is now a hardship for all of my non-disabled families.
Yes, absolutely.
Because they can't get to it, and at this point, I mean, literally, it's almost like, do I even need a website?
Right.
I mean, we do, because we answer, the website answers so many questions, and it takes away so much staff time from having to answer things. But that's, especially a small agency, I mean, I do have IT, but it's a monthly fee that I pay, and it's for the computers, not for the website. We maintain the website ourselves.
Correct.
And obviously, I know if I'm looking at it, I need to pay somebody to do this.
Right. Well, in my opinion, if you have an individual at the office read back that, I mean, that's just as good.
Yeah.
Because again, now that person has access.
Right.
Again, time consuming, but at
Right.
least then they have access.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So that's just a quick, easy fix. I mean, otherwise, you're stuck like other cities and counties in Florida, just pulling their PDFs just off, because we've got plaintiffs just going around throwing out lawsuits, like they're making it rain lawsuits.
Yeah, and it's been, like, in Seminole County, there were several cities that got hit. So I was like, yep, pull it in. So someone asked me, what are you gonna do at your website? I was like, go to my website. I was like, this website is under construction. She's like, perfect. So, I mean, because I didn't know what else to do at that point. I was, prevent defense.
Yes. I don't blame you.
And it's a solution.
It is.
Maybe not the one we want.
It's not the one that,
it's
my
not a good
staff are
one.
very
Yeah.
upset, but I mean, it's back up, but no PDF, so.
Do you have any
more
questions?
Are you aware if there's any time limit to that under construction? Cause I just made a note to my colleague and said, let's just go ahead and put it under construction and put in a disclaimer, but do you know if there's a legal?
I don't believe there
time limit
is.
to that?
I don't believe
There's
there
not
is.
a requirement for you to have a website, Rob.
Yeah, you don't
There's
need
not
a
a requirement for us to have a website.
So like if one of these
You don't have,
cases
you
said,
don't have a website.
brought it to our attention that we were not in compliance, and we have that under construction, then there's,
Right.
sometime, within 60 days or something.
Right. I'm not here to sell us or anything, but we do have solutions.
Yeah.
We do have solutions, and they're not astronomical solutions. They are cheaper than the lawsuit. And if you have to have a website up, it's just the way it is.
Yeah, but yeah, no time limit. If your website's down, there's nothing to sue you for. So.
Did you have a question?
No, just a comment. I had a website and we got hacked, and when all of this was starting, Shannon put hers under construction. I just took mine down and.
Right, yeah,
My question is, why do I even want it back? I've been almost a year now without it. We're surviving.
Well, yeah, and see, for you, it's different, because you don't have Section 8. All your people are pretty mobile. For me, the Section 8 participants is the people that use the website the most, are the people pouring in, from other areas, and where we're situated, literally, I drive 45 minutes to get to work every day, so I feel their pain about wanting to not come and get a stupid form. So I've instructed all my staff, if they call and ask for a form, send it to them, because all they're doing is printing it and then sending it back to us. We're not using fillables. I can't do a fillable myself.
That's amazing.
The struggle is real.
We usually do this at WordCamps, and we talk to other developers who make websites. Being in front of you guys is definitely a different crowd, and to hear that you're actually taking your websites down is actually a little shocking to me. So that's amazing. Really is.
Yeah, you'll never get a developer to say that.
Serious.
Let's take it down.
I did. I was like, oh, I'm taking it down.
I don't blame you, because because they're letting these lawsuits dictate
Right,
what's
and
going on, and we
for us,
won't
it's the
know.
state of Florida. Florida's litigious, the law makes it to where they can get these legal fees for stupid.
Right, out of the 2,200 lawsuits, the stat we put up, it's Florida and New York are number one. I think Florida's got like 1,500. Florida's
Just got that one
number
down,
two with
like,
500. Yeah, it's just the way it is.
And for me, we're look, we do home visits. We will help you fill out your paperwork when you come in. We are very, very customer friendly on the front end, I like my public housing residents, I know who can't read. I know these things about them, and we try and document as much as we can so that when they come in, that we can help them. And for me, it's frustrating because the people suffering are the people without disabilities, because now I've taken the site down or taken the documents down, and so it's a catch-22. Is the website gonna have to be in Spanish next? Because I'll take it down. I'm not not doing that. I can't. I don't know Spanish. There's no way. I couldn't even tell you if what was on it was right. So that's where we're going. Unfortunately, is what's next?
Yeah, no, I agree.
If we create a duplicate of our website for accessibility reasons, how appearance-wise does the duplicate have to be comparable to the main site? Like, if we don't have any photos on our main site for information purposes, can I just create a plain text website for the accessibility version?
Yeah, as long as the functions are the same, yeah, it doesn't visually have to look the same.
Ours doesn't.
No, that's the point of it. You take out pictures, you lay it out in more of a basic HTML format, nice and simple.
Because they don't have the same. To me, I would be afraid of that. I think that's.
Well, you're right. You're right, because they look at it as like segregation. They look at it as why am I having to go over here to this shitty site and everybody else gets this nice fancy site? But we're creating solutions as we go.
That's when I house some families. That's what puts
Right.
some people in some units. It's just not. It's silly. It's silly. I get it.
I just wish there were laws. They just need to lay the law so then we know.
Right.
Then we can abide by. We got a simple step-by-step process, a list that we can check off as we go, and we're good.
We need a list.
Yes, we need a list.
We don't like that.
If they would just make a request, I'm visually impaired, can you assist me with this for the phone? Absolutely, we got you.
Right. Well, I agree with that. That's why I try to tell people to do the accessibility statement. That gives that information to them. That tells them who to ask for and how to get a hold of them, so they can say, "I need help." And again, I'm in the service industry. I think 9 out of 10 problems can be solved right then and there.
Right, and where's the lawyer? Because that would be a question. Could we keep the PDFs and then put a big giant disclaimer that says, if you need assistance with these forms, please contact our office so that we can get them to you in a format that is because that would solve everything. An appropriate format to you.
How do we distinguish between a person with disability.
Well, you can't ask what the disability is,
You
so
can't.
No.
if they
Anybody
say,
calls, they
I need the
don't.
form mailed to me, then I'm gonna mail out a form, I mean.
Right, absolutely. We actually created a program. It's a contact us button that's invisible and only screen readers can see it. So this allows a low vision individual to hit a button and call you, but it doesn't inundate you with a bunch of, like you say, randoms who aren't disabled because they can't see it. You're not going to see this contact us button unless you're using a screen reader. So.
Yeah, we have the similar thing, when we open the waiting list, you have to make reasonable accommodations for a person with disabilities, and you never know what that accommodation could be. So they basically, they get to request their application in advance of the unit opening, and then they have to provide the documentation once they turn the application in, and that's just, I mean, that's a technical step. Last time I opened my list, I got 37 requests for a reasonable accommodation to have the form early. I got 7 back, and of those 7, only 3 of them really qualified for reasonable
Yeah,
accommodation. So, I
yeah.
mean, that's still a big paper trail and a lot of work, but.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, if we could, you know, if you need assistance with anything on this thing, if you can call, then, you know, that would
That would
alleviate
help,
some of
yeah.
the put the forms back.
You just add the accessibility statement on your homepage. for now?
Yeah, we stick it in the footer, so it'll be on every page. It's just like a little link at the bottom they can click and a PDF opens up, but it's an accessible PDF explaining to them what we're good at, what we're bad at, who to contact if you got a problem. If you go to W3C, you can Google accessibility statement generator, W3C, W3C is the real deal. That's the one who made, you know, they're the boss of everything. Take it 15 minutes, they ask you a bunch of questions, and then when you're done, it just spits you out a link and you can just add that anywhere you want. Is that it? No more questions?